Hi guys, welcome back to Future Dimensions 360. As you know, in our last tutorial, we had learned how to create a very basic and simple reducer for our Redux application. Keep it in mind that we are implementing a very basic and simple cake shop example. So now it's a time to implement our very first Redux store and use the reducer and the state that we had implemented until now in our code. What is Redux store? Until now, we know that Redux store is the one that keeps the state, one store for the application, and that keeps the state of the application. Everyone should know only one point about Redux store. What actually Redux store is? Redux store is a thing that keeps the complete state of the application. But in addition to that, there are some certain responsibilities that Redux store will allow us to perform. What are those responsibilities? First of all, we can say it will keep the full state of an application. Second thing is it will allow us to access the state by using a get state method. Thirdly, it will allow us to update that state or update the store state by dispatching a function. That function or that dispatch function will take the action as a parameter. What is action? One tutorial back, we had learned how to create an action by using a method and by using object. Fourthly, register the listener. It will allow us to register or any kind of listener or to subscribe by using subscribe method. We can say subscribe to some method. Subscribe will be a function that will take a callback as a parameter, and that callback will be called as soon as the state there is any kind of change in the state. And lastly, it will allow us to unsubscribe to that listener. That will be done by using the returned unsubscribe method from the subscriber. So once we are subscribing to any kind of listener or any kind of callback, it will return us some method that will help us to unsubscribe the same listener later on anytime we want. So let's go back to our application and try to implement a Redux store with all the mentioned responsibilities. We'll go back to our VS Code. Let me move it down. This is the actual application, Cakeshock application. The code looks like this, the way we have done in our last video. First of all, what we will be needing now for the creation of store, for sure we will be needing a Redux library. If you guys are using React or any updated framework for frontend, any kind of Vue.js application or Next.js application, you will be simply doing import Redux from or whatever you can say, like in this way, Redux import, you can say Redux from React Redux. Okay, that will be very basic by using ES6 syntax. So in our application, we are not using React or Next or anything. So we'll be using very basic Node.js application. We are using actually very basic Node.js application. It's a Node.js application. So we will be using very basic require syntax to import Redux. Const Redux equals to, we'll say require. What will be our requirement? Require, and it will be Redux. So I had imported the Redux already. Second thing what we have to do is we have to take the create store method from where? From Redux dot create store. Okay, so we had taken a create store method already and saved it inside create store method. So now move back in our, at the end of the application, what we have done in the beginning, we had created a function or a method that create our action. Then we have a reducer and initial state. So the very first step is, let's go back and we'll see holds the application state. So Redux store is the one that holds the application state. First of all, let's create a store, const store. How we'll create the store? We have to create by using create store method like this. So this create store method will allow us to bind our initial state with Redux store. How we can do that? We can do that by using our reducer method. So we have to pass the reducer method, and it will allow us, if there is no current state, so it will allow us to take an initial state as initial or the very first state. So we had binded our initial state with our store. What is our second step? That is allow us to access the store via get state. How we can do that is, we have to do console.log. Nothing but just we have to do initial state, and what will be our initial state? We can say store.get state method. So this will allow us to get our state or to access the state values or state object, whatever that object will be. Now let's go back. Our second point is done. Let's skip the third point. Go to fourth point, that is registered listener via subscribe method. How we can register any kind of listener? We have to do store dot subscribe. This method will allow us to pass a function as a parameter. That function will be called as soon as there is any kind of change in our state. So if there is any change happening, this function should be called. So I'll pass it as an arrow function, and I'll not say anything else. I'll keep it as very simple. Just console.log, and I will say updated state, and I will say store.get state. Just what you have to do is you have to just log the state as soon as it's updated. Now let's go back to our points. We had done the fourth point. Let's come to our third point. How we can update the state? We have to dispatch the method. There is a method called dispatch that takes action as a parameter. How we can do that is store dot dispatch. There is method in the store object called dispatch, and that will take action as a parameter. What are our action? Action, we are using create action method to create that. You can pass static actions as well as you want, like an object directly. You can copy this one and pass that there, but I had created a method, so I will call that method create action. What action you have to create? Buy cake. So it will create an action for me, buy cake, and I want to buy this cake certain amount of time, let's say 5 times, because the initial value is 10 and I want to buy this cake 5 times. Let's hit save and go back to our points. Our 4 points are done. Now the last point is that we have to unsubscribe the event listener. How we can do that is, we can do that by using unsubscribe method that is being returned by the subscribe method. So unsubscribe method, it will be returned by the subscribe method that you can call anytime later on to unsubscribe this method that you had passed inside the subscribe method. Let's hit save. Let's open up a terminal again and try to run our application, and let's see what are the results. Sudo npm start, and let's hit save. Let's hit enter, not save, and you guys can see the initial state appears with number of cake 10. Then I had purchased a cake. It turns to 9, then 8, 7, 6 and 5. How actually this application had worked. Let's make it like this so we can see this also. Initially we had imported a Redux library and we had taken a create store function from that library and saved it in a constant named as create store as well. Then we had created another constant called by cake. You can use the enums, environment variables, anything you want to save these kind of constant, because you have to avoid spelling mistakes in your switch statement later on in the reducers. That's why it's better to save them in a constant. Then we had created an action by using a create action method that takes input as a parameter, action type as a parameter, and that type will be returned back in type in the form of object with another value called action2 that we are not using right now, but later on we will add in the same example. Then we had created a constant with initial state number of cakes 10. Then we had created our very basic initial reducer that takes the current state as an input. If there is no current state, it will pass the initial state directly, and an action as an input. Action is nothing but just an object that will be passed by using a dispatch method. This dispatch method will pass what? An object that is returned from create action method like this, and that will take action type like by cake as a type. So you can just match that. If the case is by cake, action dot type is by cake, just remove always -1 from the current state. Otherwise, just always return the initial state. Then what we have done here is we had created a store and we had passed the very basic and simple reducer in the store, and we had logged our state here, initial state, by using get state method from the store that is returned from the create store method. Secondly, we had subscribe a method, a callback method that is passed inside a subscribe method in the store, and that will be called as soon as there is any kind of update in the store state. So whenever we are buying a cake, the store state is updating and this method is getting called again and again, one after another. Like this, you can see 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. As soon as this line is being executed, the initial value of the state is number of cake is 10. It will turn to 9, and same time when the state is updated, this method will be called and log the statement here to 9. Similarly, next, then next, then next, and until we are not going to unsubscribe, it will again and again call. Let's say, let me cut this one here, and after 3, like we had purchased a cake 5 times, but we had unsubscribed to our callback method after 3 iterations or after purchasing a cake 3 times. So it should print for me this updated state 3 times, and the rest 2 should not print. So let's go ahead and try to run our application again, and you guys can see now this time after unsubscribe that 2 times I am purchasing a cake, there is no log. So this is how you can build up a very basic and simple Redux application by using what? By using a Redux store that keeps your state, a very basic action, and a reducer. I hope you guys understand it. In case of any question and any query, you can comment us in the same video. You can reach us to our mailbox as well. We will be coming up with some new tutorials, with some new examples. Until then, take care. Goodbye.